Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Sarah Marie Page. Sarah writes light and fluffy YA fantasy. She lives in sunny Phoenix, Arizona, with her equally fluffy cat and with her husband, who is not fluffy. She is currently querying House of Smoke and writing Serpent Green, Venom Blue. She also has a witchy manuscript that lives in a trunk under the bed. Her work has been featured in Y Magazine, The Advocate, The Crow's Quill, and Hippocampus Magazine. While at university, she won first place in the George H. Brimhall Homecoming Essay Contest, which was entered by over 300 applicants. When she is not reading, she is rock climbing, spoiling the cat, or doing attorney things, which is her day job. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thanks for having me, Kara.
I am so glad you're here, and I feel like I already know what our book flight is going to be, and I'm so excited about it.
I am so excited about it too.
Wonderful. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
So, you covered a lot of it in the bio.
Okay.
I am from Phoenix. I have a fluffy cat. I work by day as an attorney at one of the biggest law firms in Arizona. I do trust and estates law, and then I come home and I write my little heart out. I do a lot of young adult and some spicy new adult fantasy, romantasy, which kind of is a segue into our book flight, but we'll put a pin in that. And my stories tend to be really kind of silly and fluffy. Like, for example, I'll tell you a little bit about Serpent Green, which is the one that I'm writing, and that is where my heart is right now. But basically the premise is that a portrait painter accidentally binds herself to her nemesis, the crown prince. And she paints these paintings where they're called indulgence paintings. It's kind of like a Dorian Gray painting where anything bad that you do happens to the painting. So if you stay up too late, the painting gets circles under its eyes, or if you eat too much, the painting will put on the weight. And so she accidentally binds herself to the prince instead of binds him to the painting. And worse, it goes both ways. So anything bad that she does, he feels, or anything bad that he does, she feels. And it's how they are trying to untangle and maneuver this binding. So, for example, some of the funny shenanigans I have planned. She gets her period and he gets the cramps. And it's like sitting there, like languishing, like, who stabbed you? And she's like, it happens every month. And he's like, every month? And like kind of like shocked and mortified. And then she gets mad at him and she spike climbs a ton of stairs to make her legs really sore. And he like bursts into her room as she's painting. And he's like, what did you do? And she's like, I went for a walk. And he's like, with Satan?
Oh my goodness.
So anyways, Serpent Green, really excited about that. House of Smoke has similarly dumb antics, but they're a little bit more contextual, so a little bit harder to explain.
Okay. All right. I love that. And I feel like as I think about my reading life, I don't think I read a bunch of humor, and I love the banter that are in stories because I think it can be so humorous. And I'm like, so this sounds really good.
Yes, I love a good, especially like enemies to lovers banter, where they hate each other, where you're like, kiss, 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 kiss.
Yeah.
So
there's some tension there. We feel it as readers, right?
mm-hmm.
Okay. And how long have you been writing?
I have been writing my whole life, basically.
Okay.
So I grew up like sitting on my dad's lap and dictating stories to him, and he would illustrate them with Microsoft clip art. I wrote a couple of books in high school. I took a break through a lot of college and actually law school as well.
Sure.
And then when I graduated from law school and took the bar, I was like, I've had this, like, it's the witchy book that lives under the bed. I'm like, it's been living with me forever. And if I would have written like 200 words a day, I would have written it like 5 times over. So I decided to start writing that one. And I'd been working on that for quite a while, and I was at my dream job. So if you know anything about law school is really cutthroat and really competitive. And being at the top of your class really matters to be able to get one of these like coveted jobs. And they rank everybody on a curve. So they only give out like so many A's, so many B's, so many C's. And so you have to be at the top of this curve to get these like really coveted jobs.
Not stressful at all.
Not stressful at all. Yeah. I ended up getting one of these jobs at one of these big law firms, like these big fancy law firms. And I kind of like went into it in a weird way. I went out to lunch with a partner, and it was just like kind of networking lunch. And he was like, I had applied for their summer internship program, and I was one of the finalists, but they went with one of my classmates. So I kind of knew him, and he was like, oh, we're hiring. Do you want a job with me? And I was like, yeah, I do. So started there at this big law firm and spending my nights like as a first year associate writing. And I was about 1 year in to this job. And this is where House of Smoke came from. And it's a really near and dear place to my heart. But about 1 year into practicing law, he takes me to lunch, like the same guy who was my mentor who hired me. And he said, I wanna like give it to you straight. And we're sitting at the same restaurant.
Oh my god.
Like giving me the job across the street. And he's like, I just wanted to let you know you're not good at writing, you're not good at research, you're only good at filling out forms. And we have 2 interns coming who are in and this is 1 year later, like 1 year after. And he's like, we have 2 interns coming, and they're in law school, and they're better than you. And when they come, they're gonna like push you out. So you better like start, figuring out what your future is gonna. And I think he meant it as like an I'm looking out for you sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I remember looking, and I was eating this salad, and it was a salad I always got, and I just like could not eat it because I just like felt like so sad and so like just like sad. So I called my husband across the street right after, as you do, and I like sobbed, and I was like, I think I need to find a different job. And he was like, hey, get through the rest of the day, and then we can we can regroup, and you can start like looking and stuff. And it was from this time and this point in time, and I know I'm like, now I can look back and be like, I'm a good writer. Like, that's what everybody who has read my writing, I won awards for it. But anyways, at the time though, I was so just like down and sad, and my husband would look at me and I would just start crying, and I'd be like, if I just start bursting out in tears in the middle of the day, it's because I'm thinking about my job. And House of Smoke, which is a book that I'm querying right now, that's about a girl who has to go undercover with her sexy enemy to find and steal their weapon. So it's a very fun book too, but that book came out of that place. Because I wanted to write a book about a nobody who became a somebody, because I felt like a nobody, and I really desperately wanted to be a somebody. And so I wrote House of Smoke. And as I've been querying that, I have found this community of writers and this community of friends. And some of them have been with me since the pandemic in 2020. So we've been writing for a long time. Other ones are newer friends, but those friendships go just as deep. And I remember I was querying House of Smoke, and I got some more bad work news. It was just like my boss being kind of grumpy. And then I got a pass from an agent that I was really hoping would take House of Smoke, because she had shown a lot of interest in it. And I had really worked on like networking with like her and like her authors. And one of her authors was one of my really, really good friends who was raving about the book to the agent. And the agent like passed, and she was like, I love it, there's just not something that's like clicking with me, and so for that reason I have to pass. And this happened like right after my boss was just gave some like kind of harsh feedback again at work. And I just remember like having like, it was like the crappiest day that you
Yeah.
could possibly have. And all of my friends just like showed up, and one of them like sent me flowers, and then another one just like let me like sob to her. And then another one like was like, I'm getting you yoga classes because I know you
Yeah.
love yoga. And like they just like showed up in droves and like lifted me up. And I'm like, okay, that's the heart of Serpent Green right there, is like that community and having
Yeah.
people who will come to you and like lift you up in those like really, really dark times.
Absolutely. I mean, I love that you're sharing all of this because I am not a writer myself, but I imagine that you need to have that drive, right? And that, like, where you were at emotionally after hearing that such harsh, news from your mentor of over a year, and I imagine in your heart too, like you'd been a writer in your leisure time too, right? Not just your professional life. So I imagine
Yeah.
that stung even more because you're like, wait, I'm the writer in my personal world too. And I imagine that's just such a fuel for your fire to keep going and keep pushing. And as you're talking about this querying, and I've heard other guests talk about it, I mean, that really requires some perseverance right there.
Yeah. And for a long time, I didn't talk about, and I got the original feedback from that one attorney back in 2019. So it's been a while, but for a long
Sure.
time I didn't talk about it because I was so embarrassed about,
Yeah.
and I thought that by like saying like, oh, this is the feedback I got, that would somehow reflect negatively on me. Even now, like sometimes I'm like kind of
Yeah.
like nervous to share, like,
Sure.
and then he said I wasn't a good writer, and I'm like here like being like, and I'm putting my writing out,
Yep.
um but as I've shared it, I think that everybody has those feelings of like not feeling like you're good enough,
Mm-hmm.
and having that like imposter syndrome
Yes.
and feeling like alone in your,
Yeah.
and so I really think that that story like helps a lot of people, and just being like, look, I know what it's like to be rejected,
Yeah.
and I know what it's like to be told that there are people out there who are better than you and that you're not good enough. And ultimately, I do think everybody has something important that they can give and something important that they
Absolutely.
can bring to the table. And that's really the heart that ties together both Serpent Green and House of Smoke.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you summed it up perfectly. Like, nobody wants to feel like a nobody, right? We want to feel like we're somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I'm a military spouse, so we move a lot. And recently, my local friends have now moved because they were other military spouses as well. And so I've kind of gone like where I'm starting, like, I'm like, I don't really have a community here. Like, you go to that place of being alone and like, and looking at like, what's my worth? What's my value? Like, what can I bring to the table? Right. And I think we all go through that. And there's
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I think I actually, as you were talking about the friends, of course I have friends, right? But it's just not locally. So I'm like, I have a few friends I call and they just don't live near me. But I saw this quote actually just today. And as you were talking about how important those friendships are, it's a quote by Bob Marley, actually. And it says, true friends are like stars. You can only recognize them when it's dark around you. And man, right? Like in our darkest moments, you know who you're going to go to. You know who's going to be there for you. And that's your true friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. I have one friend, she's in Utah. Her name is Sarah too, so it's kind of confusing when you like talk about us because it's like Sarah and Sarah, and then our
Yep.
husbands have to like differentiate, like because our husbands are friends too. And so our
Okay.
husbands have to be like, my Sarah, you're Sarah. But she's one of those friends. I just remember like talking to her one day, and I had like a rough day at work. I promise, like, I don't have rough days at work like all the time. I feel like every story I'm telling, I'm like, and it was a rough day. But for the most part, the days are like not rough and like pretty good. But I had another rough day at work, and just like I remember talking to her and being like, I feel like with you, I can be like 100% like honest and vulnerable and just be like, you know, when people ask you like how you're doing and like the gut reaction is good, like
Yeah.
I am doing good. And even if the day like sucks and somebody's like, how are
Yeah.
you doing? You're like, good. And you're like, all right. Anyways, but with her, I just remember she's like, how are you doing? And I was like, today was like really hard. And I was like, I am so glad to have those people who, you know, you can just say like, and be yourself and be like, today was a hard day, and they'll just listen and they'll be like, yeah, and I love you anyways, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember my dad telling me, like, if you can count your good friends on one hand, like, consider yourself lucky. And at that time, I think I was like 18 years old. So I had like high school friends and I had college friends. I literally had like, I could not fathom what he was talking about. And now I totally can. Like, I'm like, now I see what you mean, right? Like it's those true friends, those ones you can go to and be real and raw and vulnerable with, right? And they still love you anyways. They see those dark parts of you, but they still love you anyways. So
Yeah.
that's really beautiful.
And if you find those people, you have to hold on to them.
Yeah.
Like just like grab them and hold on to them and like don't let go.
Yeah. And that's what I've kind of noticed, like, as we've moved around, it's like I have a couple that I stick to, right? And I still keep those relationships going. And the other acquaintances might go by the wayside a little bit, but it's, you know, those like for those raw moments.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm calling you unedited because I'm upset or whatever, right? I've had a rough
Yes.
day. I can't even like edit my like self to talk. I just need to like vent.
And they'll just like listen and they'll be like,
Yep.
I love you anyways, you know?
Yeah. Well, I love where this has taken us to talk about friendship as well, because it's so important. You definitely need people in your corner.
Yes.
Um, and you've given us a little insight into your books. So tell me, I imagine, I don't know much about being a lawyer. I'm actually a physical therapist by trade. So I imagine your days are long and busy as well. How do you fit in writing and reading and continuing your craft?
So and you would be shocked to hear, I am actually still at the same law firm where
I meant to ask that. I'm glad you brought that
yes,
up.
I am still there. And you would also be shocked to know I outlasted both the law clerks and the attorney who gave that feedback. So I
Kudos
am
to you.
the sole man standing.
Yeah.
But the firm that I'm at is technically a lifestyle firm. So it's not like the big law firms where you sell your soul for like a
Okay.
giant bag of money. That said, yeah, I do write and I do read, and it is a lot. I set really clear goals for myself at the beginning of each quarter. Sometimes I do it quarterly, sometimes I do it monthly, but having really clear goals helps to manage time. And then just like starting small, because when you start goals right, you don't want to be like, and I'm going to start 12 things at once. That just like does not work and will fall apart. And I just like re-experienced that recently with my morning routine. I was like, I'm going to start working out and meditating. And I'm going to start like doing a gratitude journal. And I like did really well for 3 weeks. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, like, I just like dumped off the bandwagon. But yeah, just like starting small and like building the habit. So I've been writing every day almost for 5 years. And so
Wow.
now it's something that I'm just like used to sitting down and writing. For books, I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I would say most of what I do is on audiobooks,
Yeah.
and my brain, like just the way that my brain is wired, I do better when someone is telling me the story. But the beauty of an audiobook is that you can listen to it when you're like doing your hair or commuting into the office, and I can turn it up. And my mom is always like, how do you have it so fast? Like you can barely understand what they're saying. And I'm like, I can understand what they're saying.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I feel like I usually start the book at like 1.5, 1.75, and then once I kind of know what's happening, like I grip onto the storyline, right? Then I can like, okay, 2.2. So like
you're brave to go up to 2.2. I did have it at, I want to say it was at like 2.35 for the last book I was reading, but that was like abnormally fast. And gosh, I don't even remember what it was now. I just remember I had it really fast because I was like Come on, let's
Yeah.
just go on,
Well, and I think it depends on the narrator. I don't
Yes.
usually go above two, but I read something recently and I was at 2.25 because the narrator was slow. I felt like his cadence was slower. So I just was like, well,
Yes.
that's probably why I'm extra fast because this is really fast for me. But it didn't seem fast. It just was his cadence was slower. So I was like, okay. But I love audiobooks for that reason as well. I think I probably read 85% audiobooks, honestly, in my busyness of my day, just to,
Same.
yeah. So, and I try to read a hard copy at night to like kind of shut down the day.
Yeah. Do you do
So,
Kindle books or do you do physical books?
so I have a Kindle from doing the podcast because I've had some gracious like authors send me their arcs or they've sent me their copy of their book before they've come on the show. And so I will read that solely for that purpose, but it would not be my choice. It would literally be my last choice, actually. I would do audio and then hard copy and then Kindle because I just don't know why my brain cannot get into it. I don't know why.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I feel like Kindles are very divisive. Like either like people like love them, and same thing with audiobooks, actually. The
Yeah,
way that
agreed.
people prefer to read is just like divisive across the board. I have a really
Yeah.
good friend who's like cannot do audiobooks. My brain just like wanders off, and then
Yeah.
it's like 20 minutes later and I'm like, who is Derek? Um, but I'm like, no, I have to do audiobooks because but I do like Kindles. I think mine is like flipped. So
Okay.
I prefer Kindles, and I'm 30, but I have the eyesight of a 90-year-old, and so I have to like make the font really, really big on my Kindle, which
Yeah.
is kind of embarrassing when you're like reading, when you're like, because a lot of the romantasy books, right, there's like spicy
Oh,
scenes.
yeah.
I'm
You've
sitting
got
next to
those.
my husband, like reading, and it's like giant font across, and he
What you
like looks
reading,
over
babe?
my shoulder, and he's like, "Oh, okay."
That's so funny.
So
I didn't even think about that, how like the person next to you could read it that much easier right over your shoulder of like, what's going on over here?
oh, absolutely. Especially when it's like 85-point font, like like
Yeah.
giant.
Yeah. So do you read a lot of romantasy then? What are your preferred genres?
I read all over the board.
Okay.
So I read a lot of like fantasy and fantasy romance. Recently, I read a couple of thrillers. I read a lot of writing craft books.
Okay.
They're like my secure, and I think some of this came about actually from the feedback that I was given. You're not a good writer, and
Sure.
I'm like, I'm gonna show him. And
Yeah.
so I read a lot of like writing craft books, like a lot of writing craft books, and now I just like put them on in the background, and I'm like, okay, like that's like it's just like good reminders.
Yeah. It's like it's
Um,
honing your craft, right? Like
yeah,
it's like helping you do that.
absolutely.
Before you hold on, I realized I wanted to ask you two other things about writing, and I feel like we're in the perfect spot for it. So hold on. What have you learned about yourself from writing?
So that's a really good question. I think, I mean, sometimes you write things and you're like, my soul just left my heart, and like my soul just left my body and like entered the page. And especially like with House of Smoke, like some of those passages that I wrote when I was like hurting right after that
Yeah.
feedback, and they're still in the draft. Like they are in the book as it stands right now. And I read them and I'm like, I was not okay when I
Yeah.
wrote these. Like I was like not in a great like headspace. I think writing in and of itself is a really vulnerable act, and especially
Sure.
like sharing, because you're sharing a piece of yourself and your piece of your soul. And I think that's true for like most, I don't want to say every book, but a lot of books, the authors are like, I put, a piece of myself into it. And so being brave enough to share
Yeah.
has been that journey. And I think that's what I've learned. Because again, like being afraid to share at the beginning that I got this feedback, and then going from that to like now talking about it on a
Yeah.
podcast. Like
Yeah.
that's a big step.
Yeah. And I think that just shows your confidence in yourself, right? Like from like that moment of the feedback where I imagine that sunk it pretty low to like how far you've come. And that's beautiful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then what would you tell yourself, if you could go back and tell your younger writing self anything, is there anything you would go back and tell yourself?
So this is like a practical tip, but I would tell myself to study writing craft a little bit sooner
Okay.
than I actually did start. I wrote for like a year, and maybe this is okay. Like I was just like writing for fun. I didn't know what a character arc was, or like the plots had certain beats that people like to see. And even like
Sure.
subconsciously, like even if you don't like, it's just like knowing like the nuts and bolts of writing, I guess. And then I had my friend who reads like 100+ books a year. She read the first draft of the first manuscript I ever read. Bless her heart. She's the one that I can call in and be like, I had a bad day.
Yeah.
And she was like, Sarah, you have a lot of potential and you are a good writer. However, your character needs a character arc. And I was like, what is a character arc? And she's like, so, and she's not a writer, so she wasn't like pointing to like writerly
Sure.
sources. But yeah, I think I would tell myself, go study what a freaking character arc is
Sure.
sooner, because you can save yourself a lot of time.
Okay. Yeah, the more like technical side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I love that. I in doing this podcast, right? It's like, oh, okay, maybe I've been writing more, but it's in the form of journaling. Like it's never, I don't like at this point in my life, I'm like, I don't think it'll be like anything, but it's been a really good form of therapy for myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? To write. And it just hearing other people talk about writing, it has spurred and their daily writing habits. It really has intrigued me because that's never been something I've tried in my life. And I'm like, I might actually really like that. So it's been just something I'm trying. And I've really, again, it's more of a personal journey for me at this point, but I've really enjoyed the effects I've
Yeah.
felt from it.
And I would say too, to anyone who's just starting out, like don't feel like, oh, I have to go write a novel as like the first thing I wrote. Like you can publish, and I have published really short, like flash essays about like
Okay.
my life, like 1,000 words, creative nonfiction. I had like because I'm in between drafts of Serpent Green right now, and so I was trying to brainstorm some ways to fix some plot problems, but didn't want to get rusty on my prose. I wrote like a 600 word, and 600 words is not very long, a
Sure.
600 word piece about Anne Boleyn,
Okay.
and just for like kicks, right? And so
Yeah.
you can write short things and like sub it around to like literary magazines, and a practical our poetry practical nuts and bolts trick is Duotrope.
Okay.
They're $5 a month, but they are a really good database for like literary magazines to subscribe or to submit to. So if you're looking to submit to lit mags,
Yeah.
Duotrope is a good one.
Duotrope. I've never even heard of it. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Well, let's go back to okay, so you've told us how you get your reading and you've told us your genres you enjoy. Have you always been a reader?
Not as so yes and no. I took a big break when I took a big break writing.
Okay.
So through my undergrad of college and through law school. And
Yeah.
then I refound reading through writing,
Okay.
actually. And now I love reading, and I read like I'm on track for 75 books this year. So
Yay, that's
that's gonna be a lot
amazing.
of books. And that'll be like my biggest year. I usually do about 50
Okay.
books a year, but yeah, so I refound writing through, or sorry, I refound reading through writing.
Okay. I was going to ask you if there was a book that did it, but you answered that it was through
One
writing.
of them, well, yes, but one of the ones in my bookish flights was actually one of my gateway books back into reading.
Okay.
So I'm excited to share that one.
Yeah, I actually think this is the perfect time. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how the books pair together?
Yes, so today we have a lovely spread of 3 romantasy books plus a dessert.
Woohoo!
So the first romantasy book, and this is like, I decided that I wasn't going to recommend The Fourth Wing because everybody and their dog is talking about The Fourth Wing. But if you liked The Fourth Wing, then these are books to maybe consider. And we were talking a little bit before the show about
Sure.
how there's an article that I was reading the other day about how The Fourth Wing is kind of like the gateway drug into the romantasy genre because she is a contemporary writer and she wrote it like a contemporary, but put fantasy elements in. So it introduced a lot of contemporary readers to the romantasy genre. So if you are one of
Yeah,
those people, and if
that's
you are
me.
looking
I'm raising
for,
my hand.
and if you're looking for more romantasy books, so the first one is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson.
Okay.
This is a standalone. So this is the one that was my gateway book actually back into reading.
Okay.
And I read it and then I turned back around and I reread it because I liked it so much. I haven't read it in a while, but I read it twice back to back because I had so much fun. It's a
Yeah.
standalone. This one is about a girl. She's a painter and she's commissioned to paint the Prince of the Fae, and she accidentally paints him with like mortal sorrow in his eye, which really pisses him off because he's like, it's a weakness and I like can't show weakness. And
Okay.
so he like whisks her back to the Fae courts to stand trial. And a lot of the book is their journey back to the Fae courts, and she's like trying to like get away from him, right? And he can't lie. And so she starts like using that against him. And so a lot of it is their journey back. It's a
Okay.
really fun, really like light and fluffy standalone book. So that's the first one.
Okay. I love that it's standalone because sometimes fantasy series in particular, right? Is well, I'm saying series because I feel like a lot of them are series, and I'm like, okay, am I ready to commit to a series right now, right? And
Yes.
I feel like you have to almost psych yourself up. And honestly, back to Fourth Wing, I didn't realize there was a sequel to it. I kind of just went into it blind. I just kept seeing the hype about it. And it ended on such a cliffhanger that I'm like, I wish I would have waited to read it until knowing there was going to be a sequel. I wish I would have waited. But I love that this is a standalone for that reason. I can go into this and I'm not, if I'm not fully invested into 7 books, who knows?
I will say after An Enchantment of Ravens, I really wanted a sequel. And that's why I turned
Darn.
around and reread it. I was like, give me more of these characters. I like it's a really fluffy book that didn't
Yeah.
take itself too seriously. So if you want something like light and fluffy, it does not take itself too seriously. Enchantment of Ravens, really recommend that one.
Okay. And that was by Margaret Rogerson.
Yes.
Okay. What's the second book of the pairing today?
So the second book of the pairing is a pretty common romantasy book, and that's the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas.
Okay.
I am adding this one because this is the one that my friend, when she read my book and was like, you have to figure out what a character arc is. This is with the Witchy manuscript book, guys. So it's not the two that I have. But anyways,
Okay.
she was like, you have to figure out what a character arc is. And she's like, you need to work on your romance. And she recommended this book.
Okay.
And specifically, the reason that people read this book is for the second book in the series. Like the first book is honestly just okay. I'm like,
Okay.
I read it and I was like, nah, nah.
Yeah.
Like I think I DNF'd it originally because I started it and I was like, nah. Like I have a really low tolerance for info dumps. And so she was like giving an info dump and I was just like, no, I'm out. So yeah, you read the series for the second book in the series, but the second book is worth it. So
Okay. And how many books are in this series? Because I've definitely seen it, but is it 6?
3. So the main
3.
trilogy
Okay, so
has 3 and it's already all completed. So you can read the whole main trilogy, and then she's doing like a spin-off of some of the other characters, but you
maybe
can
that's
finish
what
the
I've
whole,
seen.
yeah, you can finish the whole trilogy, the whole base trilogy. So, but highly recommended. The second book is very good.
Okay. Is the third book then that one's holds up with the second book as well?
Yeah, I would say the third one's good too. The second book is the best though.
Okay.
Like out of the whole series, like you read that one for the second book. The second book is good.
All right. And this is, from what I know, it's like there's Fays in there as well, and she's a human girl, right?
Yeah, so the first one's kind of like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, where she accidentally like shoots a wolf, and then another leader of the Fae comes and whisks her away. There's a theme to my romantasy choices, guys, with being whisked away, but the leader of the Fae comes and like whisks her away, and she has to live in the Feylands, but there's a curse that's going on and she's unraveling what's going on with the curse. But
Okay.
second book, really good.
Okay. All right. So for those of you that if you have not seen this series, it is very popular.
It is very
Yeah,
popular.
it is floating around Bookstagram for sure. So that was A Court of Thorn and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And
Yes.
what's the last book of the pairing today?
The last book of the pairing is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Morin. And the reason, so this is a part of a series too, but the entire series is complete. And I will be honest, I have not read the last two in the series. I've just read the first one, but the first one stands alone. Like you can read it. I think the whole story like completes, and she does leave it a little bit open for the sequel. So it's not like every single thread is like neatly tied, but it's not like it ends on such a big cliffhanger that you're like, oh my gosh, now I must absolutely read the second one. But this one I specifically liked because of the banter. And I feel like there was really good banter between the main couple. So what the premise of this one is she's a witch and witches are like being hunted. It's like this fantasy France, 1700s France.
Okay.
And her the love interest is a witch hunter. And so is like very like into like hunting witches, and he works for the church hunting witches, and they're caught in a compromising position accidentally. I think they're like scuffling over something. It's not even that they were doing anything. And so they have to like get married to save face. And so she's like trying to hide that she's a witch and is married to this witch hunter. And the banter is really, really good. It has a very, like, he's like very straight laced and like, and then she's like kind of like wild and like a little bit silly and a little bit irreverent. So that one is another fun one. So those three that I recommended are all either young adult or older young adult / new adult. So
I didn't. What's the new adult one? I've never heard this before.
So I would say the second Court of Thorns and Roses is more new adult. And I know that's like not really a thing, but it's becoming more of a thing thanks to Book Talk. But new adult is like college age. They tend to be a little bit like steamier. Than just like general young adult books. But yeah, I would say the second Court of Thorns and Roses is more like new adult, but it sometimes is classed as young adult.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying. I had just never heard. I've heard like younger and older, but I was like, I've never heard new adult. Fill me in.
Yeah, it's like kind of a thing, but not a thing. Like people are like, when you're querying, they're like, don't query your book as new adult because it's not a thing. But I feel like Book Talk and like the Fourth Wing, and I feel like it's more of a thing now. Yeah. So it's like becoming a thing.
It will be.
I want it to be a thing.
Yes. Well, and you've also provided a dessert pairing for us today. So can you tell us about that?
So my dessert pairing is actually my own short story. So if my books, specifically Serpent Green, sounded fun, then I have a short story that is set in the world of Serpent Green. So Serpent Green is the one with the painter that accidentally binds herself to a prince. This is a prequel short story. It doesn't focus on the two main characters of Serpent Green. It's about a side character. Basically, the main character of the short story is trying to, she has one purpose that she's been raised to do, and that's marry her fiance, who's the crown prince, and then murder him. And so she actually kind of likes her fiance and like doesn't want to murder him. So she strikes a bargain with the demon prince of bargains, and is like, help me get out of this. And she finds out through the course of the short story that her fiance is planning to murder her too. So it's like a little bit of a Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It does end on, and I'll warn you, a little bit of a cliffhanger. Not like, I didn't think it was that big of a cliffhanger, but then somebody texted me and was like, how dare you end it that way? And so, but I think it's a fun short story. And if you thought Serpent Green was fun, and if you like banter and demons who can't lie and are like want to lie to you because they, there's like steamy tension, then check out Rapacity.
Okay. All right. And where can we find it?
That is on my website. So I will shoot you over the link and then maybe you can drop it in the show notes.
Absolutely.
But I will tell everybody on air, it is serpentgreen.com. So serpent, SERPENT green.com.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And I'll definitely include that in the show notes as well. So the link would be awesome. Yes. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for preparing this book flight for us. I think it's going to be a hit because of just what I've seen going around Book Talk and Bookstagram, right? Is Romantasy is really big right now. So I'm really excited we have this official episode now. How I like to end the show is with our bonus pairings, and they're just a speed round of questions here. So where is your favorite place to read?
My favorite place to read is in my bed.
Love it.
Propped up against a bunch of pillows with my cat.
Yep.
Laying on me.
Sounds very relaxing. What is one book that has changed your life?
Ooh, this is a tough one. I think I would say Essentialism by Greg McNowan. And the reason for that is that book really helped me look at and pare down what was important to do and focusing your efforts on one thing instead of a million things, right? Yeah. Especially with writing, because with writing, it's really easy to get sucked up in like shiny new thing syndrome and have like 20 books that you're trying to write. And I'm like, no, I have to pick one and work on that one consistently. So.
Okay. I love that. Are you a rereader?
I am not usually. I am usually a one and done. Except I have been rereading a little bit more lately this year than I have in previous years. So I reread The Hating Game recently, and there was another one that I reread recently. Oh, Breaking the Good Girl Myth, which is a nonfiction one. But for the most part, I do not reread.
Okay. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
Well, what I am reading right now, one of the things is I get to read a lot of cool books that my friends are in the process of writing, and I get to give feedback to them, which is like the funnest thing. So I am currently reading my friend Alex's book, and it's called To Drown the Bones. And it is about a girl who I think she binds herself to the prince. I'm not that far into it. But Alex is an extremely talented romantasy author. So she's gonna be one to watch. She has an agent, and her agent is subbing around 2 different books to publishing houses. So again, that's one to watch. So her name, if you wanted to look her up, is Alex Kennington. And her Instagram handle is Alex Kennington Writes. I'll shoot you the link to that one too, and you can pop it in the show notes.
Yes, please do. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show with me tonight. I know your time is precious, and I appreciate all you've given me today.
Yes, thank you, Farah.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Sarah Marie Page and her Romantasy book flight. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. We are ending today's episode with something special. So for the 1-year anniversary of the podcast, I ran a giveaway on social media that we were going to feature someone's book flight, and it was Jen and Sarah over at the Sisters Who Read. It's a Bookstagram account, and it was launched by these two sisters. They have always shared a love of books. Jen is a mom of 3 boys, a lover of coffee and cute shoes. Sarah is an avid traveler, runner, and houseplant enthusiast. The sisters have adorable golden retrievers who are also sisters, named Emma and Luna. Jen and Sarah don't live close together, so sharing stories and endlessly rehashing their latest reads is one of their favorite pastimes. Jen and Sarah started their Bookstagram a year ago to support their favorite authors, connect with other readers, and share their favorite and not so favorite books. They highlight their recently read books, upcoming reads, monthly recaps, their dogs' silly antics, and of course, the coffees and cocktails they are drinking along the way. Their bookstagram covers a wide range of genres, including historical fiction, mystery, science fiction, rom-com, and fantasy. Check out their books to journey and their cute pups at the.sisters.who.read. And I'll have that link in the show notes. I also asked Jen and Sarah if they would share a book flight with us, and they did. So their book flight consists of 3 novels set in enchanting worlds where magic seamlessly intertwines with the ordinary. Each story features strong female characters whose journeys reinforce the power of self-discovery, imagination, perseverance, and love. These books remind us that the magic is just a page turn away. In their Bookstagram posts, the sisters love to include quotes from their books they are spotlighting. Here is one of their favorites from the 10,000 Doors of January that captures the heart of their book flight. I hope you will find the cracks in the world and wedge them wider, so the light of other suns shines through. I hope you will keep the world unruly, messy, full of strange magics. I hope you will run through every open door and tell stories when you return. How beautiful is that? So that was from the 10,000 Doors of January. And that is the first book of their book flight by Alex E. Harrow. So in addition to the beautiful cover, a love for books, adventure, imagination, and the written word shines throughout the 10,000 Doors of January. January Scalar's world is changed forever when she finds a strange book that carries the scent of other worlds and tells a tale of secret doors, love, and perilous journeys. Each page turn reveals impossible truths around the world, her family, and herself. Book 2 of the flight is The Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. Spells for Forgetting is a beautifully written mystery with hints of magic. Told through multiple points of view, the story uncovers small-town secrets and the challenges of long-lost love on an enchanting, remote Pacific Northwest island. And the last book of the pairing today is The Secret Book of Flora Lee by Patty Callahan Henry. When a woman discovers a rare book that has connections to her past, long-held secrets about her missing sister, and their childhood spent in the English countryside during World War II, this is all revealed. It's a transporting and refreshingly original novel about the bond between sisters, the complications of conflicted love, and the enduring magic of storytelling. Thank you, Jen and Sarah of the Sisters Who Read, for sharing this amazing book flight with us. I am so excited to feature y'all on the podcast and on our social media pages as well. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are picking up next, especially if you have heard about the book on the show, please tag us. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. This is a brand new show, so if you enjoyed it, please head over to Apple Podcasts and give the show a review. Your review not only helps me, but it also helps the show reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure that you will not miss an episode. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.